The worst decisions in my life always started with one simple sentence. Can you help me? The coffee had gone cold in my hand, but I kept pretending to drink it, standing behind the counter like everything was normal, like the man sitting at table 7 wasn't watching me with that quiet, patient focus that made my skin feel too tight. I told myself I was imagining it. People stare all the time. It's part of the job. Smile, serve, disappear. That's the rule. But this felt different. He hadn't ordered anything else in 20 minutes. Just sat there, fingers loosely wrapped around a glass of water, eyes occasionally lifting, always landing back on me. I checked the clock above the kitchen door. 9:42 p.m. My shift ended at 10. 18 more minutes. I could last 18 minutes. Emily, my manager, called from behind me, voice low but sharp. Table 4 needs their check. I nodded quickly, grabbing the receipt, grateful for the distraction, but as I stepped out from behind the counter, I felt it again, that awareness, like a shadow just a step too close. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. Not yet. Focus. Table 4. Smile. Hands steady. Except it wasn't. The paper trembled slightly between my fingers as I set it down. No rush, I said automatically, the words practiced, hollow. The woman at the table smiled politely, but I barely saw her. My attention kept drifting, pulling back toward table 7 like gravity. Something was wrong. Not loud. Not obvious. Just wrong. I turned too quickly, nearly colliding with a chair, and that's when I saw him move. Not the man at table 7. Someone else. Near the entrance. Tall. Broad shoulders. Watching me in a way that made my stomach drop. Not curiosity. Not interest. Recognition. I didn't know him. I was sure of that. But the way he looked at me said he knew me. Or thought he did. My breath caught. Think. The door was behind him. The kitchen was too far. My phone was in my locker. I had nowhere to go. My eyes scanned the room, desperate, landing on the nearest person who looked safe. He was sitting alone. Dark suit. Still. Too still. Like the noise of the restaurant didn't touch him. I didn't think. I couldn't. My feet were already moving before my mind caught up, heart pounding so hard it blurred everything else. And then I was standing beside him, close enough to feel the quiet weight of his presence, and I reached for his hand. It was warm, solid, real. He looked up at me slowly, eyes sharp, unreadable, and for a second, I forgot what I was going to say. Then the words came out anyway, breathless, shaking. Can you pretend to be my husband, just for a minute? Silence. Not the restaurant. Just him. Just us. His gaze didn't leave mine. Not even when his fingers tightened slightly around my hand. Not even when the man by the door started walking toward us. And then, finally, he stood. Slow. Controlled. Like this wasn't unexpected. Like this wasn't strange. Like I hadn't just made the biggest mistake of my life. His hand did not let go of mine. It tightened just enough to feel intentional, not enough to hurt. And that difference made my chest tighten in a way I could not explain. He stepped slightly in front of me, subtle, controlled, like a shift in gravity rather than movement. And suddenly the space between me and the man approaching felt blocked. Is there a problem? His voice was calm, low, steady in a way that did not match the noise around us. And for the first time since this started, I realized how quiet he was compared to everyone else. The man near the door slowed. I felt it more than saw it. The hesitation. The recalculation. I think there is a misunderstanding. The stranger continued, his tone unchanged, but something in it carried weight, something that made even me want to listen carefully. My wife and I were just leaving. My wife. The words landed heavier than they should have. I swallowed, forcing my breathing to stay even, fingers still wrapped around as like I belonged there, like I had not just invented this entire situation out of fear. The man across from us glanced between us, his expression tightening, but he did not step closer. Not anymore. Not after that sentence. Not after the way the man beside me stood there like he had already decided how this would end. I must have the wrong person, the man said finally, his voice less certain now. And just like that, he turned, walking back toward the door, each step slower than the last, like he was still thinking about it. Like he was not convinced. I did not breathe until the door opened and closed behind him. The sound echoed louder than it should have. I let go of the stranger's hand immediately, stepping back like the contact had burned me. Thank you, I said quickly, the words tumbling out too fast, too tight. I am sorry, I just needed You needed help, he finished, his voice still calm. But now there was something else under it. Something sharper. His eyes did not leave mine. And up close, they were darker than I expected. Not warm. Not cold. Just precise. You do not ask a stranger for something like that unless you are running from something, he added, tilting his head slightly, studying me like he was piecing something together. My mouth opened, then closed. I had no answer that sounded normal. No explanation that did not make this worse. It is handled now, I said instead, forcing a small smile that felt completely out of place. You can go back to your evening. He did not move. Not even a little. The noise of the restaurant seemed to return all at once, plates clinking, voices overlapping. But around us, there was still that same strange stillness, like everything important was happening in a space no one else could see. I was not having an evening, he said quietly, and something about that made my stomach drop again, until you decided to involve me in yours. I blinked, unsure if that was a warning or something else entirely. I did not mean to cause trouble, I said, softer now, more honest than I wanted to be. You did not, he replied, almost immediately, but there was a pause after, just long enough to feel intentional. But you might have created something else. My heart stuttered. What does that mean? I asked before I could stop myself. His gaze flicked briefly toward the door, then back to me, sharper now, more focused. It means, he said, lowering his voice just enough that I had to lean in slightly to hear him. People do not walk away from me that easily. The words settled between us, quiet and heavy, and for the first time, I wondered if the man I had been afraid of was never the real problem at all. I should have walked away. That was the normal response. Say thank you, step back, return to the counter, pretend none of this happened. That was how people like me survived places like this. But my feet did not move. And neither did he. The air between us felt different now, heavier, like something had shifted without permission. I really appreciate what you did, I said, forcing steadiness into my voice, even though my pulse was still too fast, but I think everything is fine now. He watched me for a second longer, as if measuring the truth in that statement. Then his gaze dropped briefly to my hands. I had not realized I was still holding them slightly curled, like I expected to reach for him again. I straightened them quickly, tucking them behind my back. You are still shaking, he said quietly. It was not a question. I exhaled, a small, unsteady breath. It has been a long shift. He did not respond immediately. Instead, his eyes moved past me, scanning the room in a way that felt deliberate, calculated. Not casual, not curious. A few tables away, a man in a dark jacket stood up, glanced in our direction, then looked away just as quickly. I might have missed it if I had not been standing next to someone who clearly did not miss anything. Do you know him? The stranger asked, his voice lower now. I followed his line of sight, then shook my head. No, it came out too fast. He noticed. Of course he noticed. You are lying, he said, not accusing, just stating it like a fact that had already been confirmed. Heat rose to my face. I do not know him, I repeated, softer this time, choosing each word carefully, but he thinks he knows me. That was the closest I could get to the truth without unraveling everything. His expression did not change, but something in his posture did. A slight shift. A decision being made. That is more dangerous, he said after a moment. My stomach tightened. I can handle it. I replied quickly, even though the words felt thin the second they left my mouth. He looked back at me then, fully this time, and for the first time, I felt like I was the one being studied, not the situation. No, he said calmly. You cannot. The certainty in his voice made my chest go still. Not cruel, not harsh, just absolute. Before I could respond, movement caught my attention again. The man from earlier was back. Not alone this time. He did not come closer, but he did not leave either. He stood near the door, speaking quietly to someone else, both of them glancing toward me just long enough to make it obvious. My fingers tightened instinctively against my palms. You said it was handled, the stranger murmured beside me. I thought it was, I admitted. Silence stretched for half a second. Then he stepped slightly closer, not touching me this time, but near enough that I could feel the shift in space again. Controlled. Intentional. Then you stay here, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Until I decide otherwise. I blinked, caught off guard. I do not work for you, I said, trying to find some ground to stand on. even as my voice softened at the edges. No, he agreed, almost too easily, but you chose me. The words landed deeper than they should have. I opened my mouth, ready to push back, to correct him, to say this was temporary, accidental, meaningless. But the look in his eyes stopped me. Not because it was threatening, because it was certain, like the choice had already been made. Not by me, by him. And somehow, that felt more real than anything I had said tonight. I felt it before I understood it. The shift, subtle, almost invisible, but real enough to tighten something deep in my chest. The man near the door stopped pretending to leave. His posture changed, shoulders squaring slightly, attention no longer hidden. Whoever he was speaking to followed his gaze this time. Straight to me. I swallowed, the air suddenly thinner. They are not leaving, I said under my breath, not sure if I was speaking to him or just thinking out loud. No, he replied, just as quietly. They are waiting. That word settled heavy. Waiting. Not leaving. Not backing down. Waiting. My instinct screamed to step away, to put distance between myself and whatever this was becoming, but my feet stayed rooted too. The floor like I had forgotten how to move on my own. I cannot stay here, I whispered, more to myself now, the edges of panic creeping back in. I have to finish my shift. It sounded ridiculous even as I said it. Orders, tables, receipts. None of it mattered compared to the way the room felt now. He turned his head slightly, looking at me again, not rushed, not concerned, just aware. Your shift is over, he said. I blinked. No, it is not. I still have. It is, he repeated, calm, final, like he had already decided something I had not agreed to yet. Confusion flickered through me. You do not get to decide that, I said, a little stronger this time, holding on to the smallest piece of control I could find. His expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened just slightly, enough to make my words feel smaller the moment they left my mouth. I already did, he said. Before I could respond, movement caught my attention from behind the counter. My manager. He was walking toward us, but slower than usual, his expression tight, uncertain, like he was approaching a situation he did not understand but knew better than to interrupt carelessly. He stopped a few feet away, glancing at me first, then at the man beside me, and something in his posture shifted immediately. Subtle, respectful, almost cautious. Emily, he said, clearing his throat. You can clock out early tonight. My heart skipped. What? The word slipped out before I could stop it. He avoided my eyes for a second, then looked back at me, firmer now. You are done for the night. Go ahead and head out. This was not normal. Nothing about this was normal. I turned slowly toward the man beside me, my thoughts scrambling to catch up with what had just happened. What did you do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He did not answer right away. Instead, he watched my manager walk away without another word, as if the outcome had always been guaranteed. Then he looked back at me. I removed the only reason you had to stay, he said simply. The ease of it made my stomach twist. You cannot just do that, I said, but the conviction was already slipping. I can, he replied, not with arrogance, not with force, just quiet certainty, and I did. My pulse quickened again, but not from fear alone this time. From something else, something I could not quite name. Why? I asked before I could stop myself. Why are you doing this? He held my gaze, steady, unblinking, like he had been waiting for that question. Because, he said slowly, each word deliberate, you reached for me. The simplicity of it made it worse, made it heavier, like that one moment had changed something I could not undo. Behind him, the door opened again, a quiet sound that somehow cut through everything else, and when I looked up, I saw it. A black car pulling up just outside the window, headlights low, engine still running. Waiting. My breath caught. What is that? I asked, even though part of me already knew. He did not look back this time. He did not need to. Your way out, he said. The word out should have felt like relief. It did not. It felt like a step I was not ready to take, like a line I was about to cross without fully understanding what was on the other side. I hesitated, just for a second, my instincts pulling in two different directions. Stay where it is familiar, or follow the man who just changed everything without raising his voice. He tilted his head slightly, watching me think, watching me hesitate. Emily, he said, my name quieter now, but somehow more powerful than before. You asked me to be your husband. My chest tightened. That was just A moment, he finished, stepping just a little closer. Not enough to trap me. Just enough to make the space between us disappear again. But moments have consequences. I stared at him, my thoughts loud, chaotic, but underneath all of it, one truth rising clearer than anything else. I had asked for help, but I had not chosen who I was asking. And now, it felt like that choice was no longer mine to take back. The engine outside did not turn off. It stayed there, low and steady, like it had no intention of leaving without me. I could feel it through the glass, that quiet pressure, like time itself had shifted direction and was now waiting on my next move. I looked at the door, then back at him. "I'm not getting into that car," I said, the words firm, even if my pulse betrayed me. His expression did not change. Not surprised, not offended, just patient. "You are," he replied, just as calmly, like we were discussing something already decided. I shook my head, taking a small step back, needing space, needing something that felt like my own choice again. "I do not even know your name," I said, grasping for something real, something normal to anchor myself. For the first time since this started, there was a slight pause. Not hesitation, consideration. "Adrian," he said finally. The name settled into the moment like it belonged there. Adrian Russo. Russo. The name echoed faintly in the back of my mind, like something I had heard before but could not place. Something that carried weight without context. "Emily," I replied automatically, even though he had already said my name, already knew it, and that realization made my stomach tighten again. "I know," he said quietly. Of course he did. My eyes flicked back to the door again. The man from earlier was still there, still watching, not approaching, but not leaving either. The space between us felt smaller now, tighter, like options were disappearing one by one. "If I leave with you," I said slowly, choosing each word carefully, "what happens next?" It was the only question that mattered. Not who he was, not what he could do, just what this meant for me. Adrian's gaze held mine, steady, unblinking. "You stop being an easy target," he said. The answer was simple. Too simple. "And the cost?" I asked, because there was always a cost. There had to be. He stepped closer then, not abruptly, not forcing anything, just enough that I could feel his presence again, solid and controlled. "You stay where I can see you," he said. My breath caught. "That is not an answer," I whispered. "It is the only one that matters," he replied. Behind him, the car door opened. Not loudly, just enough to be noticed. A figure stepped out briefly, speaking into an earpiece, then stepped back again, holding the door open. Waiting. Always waiting. I pressed my lips together, my thoughts racing, trying to find a version of this where I still had control, where this was still my decision. "I can call someone," I said, even though I knew I would not. "I can handle this another way." Adrian watched me for a long second, and for the first time, there was something almost unreadable in his expression. Not doubt, not concern, something closer to calculation. "You could try," he said. Not dismissive, not mocking, just honest. And somehow, that made it worse. Because he was not stopping me. He just did not believe I would succeed. The silence stretched, filled only by the low hum of the engine outside and the distant noise of the restaurant continuing like nothing had changed. Like my life had not just tilted into something I did not understand. I looked at the door again. At the car. At the man who had appeared in my life less than 10 minutes ago and somehow removed every safe option I thought I had. Then I looked back at Adrian. "If I get in that car," I said, my voice quieter now, more honest than I wanted it to be. "This does not stay pretend anymore, does it?" His gaze did not waver. Not even for a second. "No," he said. The word landed like a line drawn in permanent ink. No going back. No pretending. No simple explanation that erased tonight. I felt it then. The exact moment everything shifted from temporary to something else entirely. I had asked for help, and now I had to decide if I was willing to accept what that help actually meant. The silence after his answer felt louder than anything else in the room. No. One word, clean and final, and suddenly the world I understood no longer fit the situation I was standing in. I looked at the car again. The door still open, still waiting, like it knew I would not walk away, like it had already counted me in. My fingers tightened slightly at my sides, the fabric of my apron still wrapped around my waist, a reminder of the life I had been in just minutes ago. Normal, small, predictable. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself, and took a step toward the door. Not because I was sure, because standing still felt worse. Adrian did not reach for me, did not guide me. He just moved with me, one step behind, one step beside, always close enough to feel like a decision had already been made. The closer we got, the quieter everything became. The restaurant noise faded. The clatter, the voices, the movement. It all slipped behind me like it belonged to someone else's life. The door opened before I touched it. I did not see who did it. I just felt the shift, the air changing, cooler now, sharper. Outside, the night wrapped around us, the city lights reflecting off the black surface of the car like something polished and untouchable. I hesitated for half a second, just long enough to feel the weight of what I was about to do. Then I stepped forward. The man by the door moved immediately, not blocking, not rushing, just making space, like this moment had been rehearsed without me knowing. I glanced at him briefly. Dark suit, earpiece, focused but not tense, not curious, like I was not a surprise, like I was expected. That realization settled deeper than anything Adrian had said. I turned slightly, looking back at the restaurant one last time. Through the glass, everything looked the same. People eating, talking, living, like nothing had changed. Like I had not just walked out of that world without knowing if I could walk back in. Emily, Adrian's voice, quiet but grounding, pulled my attention back to him. He stood close now, just behind my shoulder, not touching, but near enough that I could feel the steady presence of him. If you step in, he said, his tone lower now, more personal, you do not look back. I swallowed. You do not give me much choice, I replied softly. There was a pause, just a second, then his voice again, just as steady. You had a choice. My chest tightened slightly. And now? I asked. Now you have consequences, he said. Not harsh, not threatening, just true. I looked at the open door, the dark interior, the quiet space waiting inside. It did not look dangerous. It did not look safe either. It just looked final. I took a breath, then another, and then I stepped in. The seat was softer than I expected. The space quiet, controlled. The door closed behind me with a soft, solid sound that felt louder than anything else tonight. Adrian followed, settling into the seat beside me with the same calm precision he had shown all night. The car moved almost immediately. Smooth, silent, like it had been waiting for that exact moment. I stared straight ahead, hands resting in my lap, trying to slow my breathing, trying to understand what I had just done. The city lights passed by the window in blurred lines, familiar streets turning into something distant, something I was leaving behind one block at a time. Where are we going? I asked finally, my voice quieter now, steadier than I felt. Adrian did not look at me right away. His gaze stayed forward, watching the road like everything else was already handled. Somewhere you will not be followed, he said. The answer was simple. Too simple. I nodded slightly, even though that did not explain anything that mattered. The silence returned, but this time it was different. Not empty, not uncertain, just settled, like the next part of my life had already begun, and I was just now catching up to it. I pressed my fingers together lightly, grounding myself in something real, something I could control, even if everything else had slipped out of my hands. I had asked for help, and now I was sitting beside a man who did not do anything halfway. Not help, not control, not choices. And for the first time since this started, I understood something clearly. I had not just stepped into his car. I had stepped into his world. The city blurred past the window, but I stopped trying to recognize it after the third turn that did not make sense. We were not following traffic patterns, not the way normal drivers did. The car moved with purpose, smooth and uninterrupted, like every light ahead of us had already been decided. I shifted slightly in my seat, the leather cool against my skin, my reflection faint in the glass beside me. I looked smaller there, quieter, like someone who had already agreed to something she did not fully understand. You are thinking too loudly, Adrian said, his voice calm, almost conversational, but it cut through the silence instantly. I glanced at him, surprised. Is that a problem? I asked. Not yet, he replied, his gaze still forward. But it will be if you start trying to run through outcomes you cannot control. I let out a quiet breath, leaning back slightly. You say that like I do not have any control at all. This time, he turned his head just enough to look at me. Not fully, just enough. You have control over how you respond, he said. Not over what has already been set in motion. The words settled deeper than I wanted them to. I looked away, back at the window, watching the lights pass in steady rhythm. So this is it? I asked after a moment, my voice quieter now, more measured. I leave work, get into a stranger's car, and suddenly I am what? Under your protection? The word felt strange on my tongue. Protection. Like it came with conditions I had not agreed to. Adrian did not answer right away. The pause stretched just long enough to make me aware of it. You are visible now, he said finally. That is the difference. I frowned slightly. Visible to who? He did not respond immediately. Instead, he reached forward slightly, adjusting something on the center console, and the partition between the front and back seats slid up with a soft, controlled motion, sealing us into a quieter space. More private. My pulse picked up again, not from fear exactly, but from the shift. The isolation. To people who pay attention, he said at last, his voice lower now, more focused, and to people who react when something changes. I turned toward him fully now. Because I asked you for help? I asked. Because you asked me, he corrected. The emphasis was small, but intentional. I held his gaze, trying to read something in it, something that explained why that mattered so much. And that makes me a target? I pressed. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened slightly. It makes you connected, he said. Connected. The word felt heavier than anything else he had said so far. Not danger. Not threat. Connection. Like a thread had been tied without me noticing. I did not choose this, I said quietly. You did, he replied, just as softly. I shook my head, frustration mixing with the uncertainty twisting in my chest. I chose a moment, I said, my voice tightening slightly. Not whatever this is. He studied me for a second, longer this time. Like he was deciding how much to explain. That is the difference between you and me, he said finally. You see moments. I see consequences. The car slowed slightly, the change in motion subtle but noticeable, and I felt my body react before my mind did, tension returning in small, controlled waves. I glanced toward the front, but the partition blocked my view. Where are we? I asked. Adrian did not answer right away. Instead, he looked at me, fully this time, his attention no longer split between me and the road ahead. Somewhere that belongs to me, he said. The simplicity of it made my breath catch again. The car came to a smooth stop. No sudden movement. No noise. Just stillness. I stared at the closed partition, then back at him. And what happens when we get out? I asked, the question quieter now, more honest than I wanted it to be. Adrian's gaze held mine, steady and certain in a way that made everything else feel less stable. Then, he said slowly, you start understanding what you stepped into. The door unlocked with a soft click that echoed louder than it should have, and for a second, I did not move. Because for the first time since I got into this car, I realized something clearly. I was not just being taken somewhere. I was being brought in. The door opened from the outside before I could decide if I was ready to move. Cool night air slipped into the car, carrying a faint scent of something clean, distant, nothing like the restaurant I had just left behind. I stayed still for half a second too long, my hand resting lightly against the seat, grounding myself in something familiar, even if nothing else was. Emily, Adrian said quietly, not impatient, not pushing, just present. I turned toward him, my thoughts still catching up with the moment. You said I would understand. I murmured, my voice softer now, less defensive, more uncertain. He held my gaze, steady as always. I said you would start to, he corrected. That difference mattered. I could feel it. I nodded slightly, then shifted forward, placing one foot outside the car. The ground felt solid. Real. I stood slowly, straightening, and the first thing I noticed was how quiet everything was. No traffic noise. No voices. Just a controlled stillness that felt intentional. I looked up. The building in front of me was not what I expected. Not flashy. Not obvious. Clean lines. Dark glass. Minimal lighting. The kind of place that did not need to announce itself to be noticed. My eyes moved to the edges instinctively. Two men stood near the entrance. Same posture. Same stillness. Watching without staring. Not security in the way I understood it. Something more precise. More aligned. Adrian stepped out behind me, the door closing softly, as if the sound itself had been managed. He moved past me without rushing, and I realized something immediately. Everyone here knew him. Not because they greeted him. Because they adjusted. Slight shifts in posture. Subtle acknowledgments. Space being made without being asked. It was quiet, but it was clear. This was his world. I swallowed, following him a step behind, not because he told me to, but because standing still felt more exposed than moving forward. The doors opened before we reached them. Of course they did. Inside, the air was cooler, the lighting soft but exact, everything placed with intention. No clutter, no wasted space. Even the silence felt designed. My footsteps sounded louder than they should have against the polished floor, and I became painfully aware of every small movement I made. Adrian did not slow down, but he did not leave me behind either. He walked like he knew I would follow. Like that part was already decided. We reached an elevator without stopping. The doors opened instantly. No waiting. No hesitation. I stepped inside after him. The space enclosed, quiet, almost too quiet now. The doors closed, sealing us in again. I exhaled slowly, my reflection staring back at me from the mirrored wall. I barely recognized myself. Same clothes, same face, but something had shifted. Something I could not name yet. This is not temporary, is it? I asked, the question leaving me before I could filter it. Adrian's reflection met mine, his expression unchanged, controlled, unreadable in the way that now felt familiar. No, he said. The elevator moved. Smooth. Silent. My stomach dropped slightly with the motion, but I stayed still, my hands loosely clasped in front of me, trying to keep my thoughts from spiraling into places I could not manage. Then what is this? I asked, my voice quieter now, almost steady. He did not answer immediately. The pause stretched just enough to make the answer feel heavier when it came. This is where you stop reacting, he said, and start understanding. The elevator slowed, then stopped. The doors opened to a hallway that looked even more controlled than the one below. Fewer details. More intention. Like everything here existed for a reason I did not know yet. I hesitated at the threshold. Just for a second. Because I felt it again. That shift. That invisible line. Behind me was everything I knew. In front of me was everything I did not. Adrian stepped out first, then paused, turning slightly, not blocking me, not forcing anything, just waiting. Watching. Giving me the illusion of a choice that no longer felt like mine. I took a breath. Then I stepped forward. And the moment I crossed that line, I understood something I had been trying not to see all night. I had not just entered his world. I had been placed in it. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, quiet in a way that made every step feel deliberate, like the building itself was watching me adjust. I kept my pace even, matching Adrian without thinking, my attention catching on the smallest details. The way the lighting never flickered. The way the air stayed the same temperature no matter how far we walked. The way no one spoke, but everyone noticed. A door at the end opened before we reached it. Of course it did. Inside, the space shifted again. Warmer this time. Not softer, not relaxed, just more personal. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below, lights scattered like something distant and untouchable. I stopped without meaning to. The view pulled me in for a second, grounding me in something familiar. The city I knew, the streets I walked, all of it still there, just far away now. You can breathe, Adrian said behind me, his voice quieter than before, less command, more observation. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. I am breathing, I replied, but it came out thinner than I intended. He stepped past me, moving into the room like it belonged to him in a way that made everything else feel temporary. Because it did. He crossed to the far side, setting something down on a sleek surface I had not noticed before, then turned back to face me fully. No distractions now. Just him. This is where you stay, he said. The words landed slower this time. Not rushed. Not forced. Just placed. I blinked, the meaning catching up a second later. Stay. I repeated, the word feeling heavier than anything else tonight. For how long? He held my gaze, steady as always. Until it is resolved. My chest tightened slightly. You keep saying things like that, I said, stepping further into the room without realizing it, drawn in by the need to understand. Like there is something already happening that I do not know about. He did not deny it. That was the first thing I noticed. There is, he said simply. Silence followed. Not empty, just real. I looked around again, taking in the space, the quiet, the distance from everything I had known just hours ago. And you think keeping me here fixes it? I asked. It contains it, he corrected. That word settled differently. Not safe. Not solved. Contained. Like something had already started moving, and this was the only way to keep it from spreading further. I folded my arms lightly, more for comfort than defense. You said I was visible now, I said slowly, replaying his words, trying to connect the pieces, because I asked you for help. He nodded once. Yes. I swallowed, my thoughts finally aligning into something clearer. Then this is not about me, I said, the realization settling in, steady and undeniable. It is about you. His expression did not change, but the silence that followed confirmed everything. Everything is about me, he said finally. Not arrogance. Not pride. Just fact. I let out a small breath, shaking my head slightly, more at the situation than at him. I should not have touched you, I murmured, the truth landing harder now that I understood it. No, he agreed quietly, but you did. The simplicity of it made it final. I looked at him then, really looked this time, past the control, past the calm, trying to understand the man I had stepped into without knowing. And now, I asked, my voice softer, steadier, not as afraid as before. Adrian met my gaze, unshaken, certain in a way that left no room for doubt. Now, he said slowly, you stop being a stranger. The words settled between us, quiet but permanent, and for the first time since this started, I understood the full weight of what I had done. I had asked him to pretend, but nothing about him was pretend. And now, neither was this.